So Rohit, an ambitious man, falls under the knife of his pregnant wife on their wedding day. A seemingly perfect day hides dark secrets that no one expected. A secret homosexual relationship with Rakesh's best friend has silently pushed everything to the brink. Kavya, the seemingly innocent wife, is not the one who can only endure what really happened. The Mumbai night is brilliant with the lights from the skyscrapers reflecting on the bustling traffic below. In a luxurious villa by the sea, Rohit and Kavya's engagement party is taking place with extravagance and splendor. Everything seems perfect. Laughter, music, and congratulations fill the space, but hidden behind the curtain of happiness is a dark truth, a secret that can push everything to the brink of destruction. Rohit stood in the crowd, his face calm and the perfect smile he had practiced for years. All eyes were on him, admiring and blessing him, but deep inside, an uncontrollable unease was slowly eating away at him. He knew that tonight was not only the beginning of a new life, but also the end of a relationship that had been hidden in the dark for too long. Beside him, Kavya, the woman with eyes filled with happiness, did not realize that the life she was dreaming of was just an empty shell. Since her school days, she had secretly loved Rohit, silently hoping that one day he would look at her with different eyes. And then her dream seemed to come true when he proposed. But behind that facade, Kavya had no idea that Rohit's heart had long belonged to someone else. While the crowd continued to cheer happily, Rohit's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar figure. Standing silently in the dark corner, Rakesh, Rohit's best friend and secret lover, watched silently. No one at the party understood the complicated relationship between the two, a bond that had been built since their school days, a love that neither of them dared to openly admit. Every moment that passed during the party made Rohit feel suffocated. The twinkling lights were no longer enough to hide the anxiety that was invading his mind. Rakesh was still there, his eyes full of silence but containing an indescribable hurt. Since they were young men, they had overcome all challenges together, but now standing before this wedding, their love was on the brink of breaking up. Little did Kavya know that, before her, there had been a silent love between these two men. Even as she stood next to Rohit, she could not feel the distance in his mind, a distance that she had unwittingly created the moment she entered Rohit's life. She never suspected that his every smile, every affectionate look, contained a lie that she could not see. A few months ago, when Rohit and Rakesh argued about the future, their seemingly eternal love was pushed to the brink. Rohit's inner turmoil drove him to the bar, and that's when Kavya appeared. In a drunken stupor, the feeling of loss and loneliness made Rohit approach her. That night, he chose her not because of love, but because of desperation. But that was also the moment that changed everything, when Kavya discovered she was pregnant, pushing all three of them down a path with no way out. The music in the party continued to echo, but to Rohit, every sound was a reminder of the lie he was living. Every touch of Kavya's hand made him feel like he was betraying not only her, but himself. The love between him and Rakesh never faded, but now it was just a scar that was gradually being forgotten by responsibility and society. As the engagement party ended, Kavya was beaming with happiness, unaware that her future husband's heart was not with her. Rohit smiled at her, but it was an empty smile, a mask he had worn for years to hide the truth. As the lights in the mansion dimmed, Rohit quietly walked out of the party. He couldn't take it anymore. His footsteps headed towards the room where Rakesh was waiting. In that moment, he knew he was walking into an inevitable storm. A storm of love, of conflict, and of betrayal. In the dark room, Rakesh stood there without a word. Just the look in his eyes was enough to make Rohit's heart heavy. There was an invisible distance between them, a distance that Rohit created the moment he chose to marry Kavya. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop the fact that the love between them was still there, smoldering beneath the surface of lies and betrayal. In the darkness, everything became clearer than ever. Rohit knew that this wedding was not only the end of his relationship with Rakesh, but also the beginning of an inevitable tragedy. Kavya was pregnant, and that forced him to fulfill his responsibility, even though his heart was no longer with her. What thoughts swirled in Rohit's mind as he stood there in the darkness of the night and the rift of the relationship that had once meant everything to him. In that moment, no words could describe the pain that all three of them were enduring. The secret was still there, but the truth could not be hidden forever. The wedding day was approaching, but with each step towards the ceremony, Rohit's heart was filled with an unquenchable fear. The relationship with Rakesh continued, but now he felt its fragility. Rakesh, in his grief and jealousy, becomes increasingly clear that he cannot bear to lose Rohit to Kavya. However, Rohit cannot leave the pending marriage due to his responsibility to Kavya and their unborn child. Rakesh kept appearing regularly. Sometimes even Kavya caught him in moments when she felt it was unnecessary. At first she didn't pay attention, but gradually his presence became a confusing mystery. She could sense something was wrong, but instead of facing it directly, she kept a calm wall and observed from a distance. The feeling of suspicion inside her kept growing as Rohit disappeared every night without a clear explanation. But Kavya, not one to succumb to insecurities easily, knew that the time to act was not yet. She needed to dig deeper, needed to catch him red-handed in the clearest and coldest way. So one night, Kavya woke up and didn't see Rohit beside her. Her instinct told her that this was not an ordinary night. We decided to follow him, not in haste but with an unusual calmness. She knew that tonight would be a night of truth. In the quiet space of the mansion, her light footsteps were almost swallowed by the darkness. And she entered the room at the end of the corridor. The scene before her eyes was no longer a surprise. Rohit and Rakesh were standing next to each other, their intimacy clearly needing no explanation. But what made everything more terrifying was Kavya's attitude. She didn't scream, didn't show any confusion, and instead she entered the room as if this was a normal thing, as if she had known this for a long time. He gently closed the door behind her and smiled. A meaningful smile, not of anger but of someone in power. Kavya approached Rohit with an unnerving calm. There was no sign of hurt or shock in her eyes. On the contrary, she acted as if she was in control. Her hand brushed against Rohit's shoulder, but it was not a mere gesture of intimacy. It was a reminder that he was still hers, that she held his life in her hands. While Rakesh's eyes were filled with shock, Rohit could clearly feel the coldness in his wife's every move. Kavya's calmness carried a heavy pressure. Her warnings did not need to be spoken. Her actions contained it all. She continued to smile, her sharp eyes looking straight at Rohit, but her demeanor remained light, as if nothing had happened. She leaned down, raised her hand to his face, and whispered something that was enough to send both men into a dark corner. Not direct threats, but powerful implicit reminders. She insisted that, no matter what happened between them, Rohit would still be her perfect husband in front of everyone, and that he would continue to maintain the image forever. Kavya's silence was more than a weapon. It was a sign of a sophisticated calculation, where every move she made Rohit and Rakesh feel trapped. Rakesh tried to figure out if she knew more than she let on, but Kavya's eyes betrayed no emotion other than complete control. She had turned the situation into a game where she was the controller, while the two men were mere pawns. Kavya did not need to show anger or pain. It was her calmness, her gentleness, and her calculating gestures that made Rohit and Rakesh feel suffocated. She did not need to issue orders or threaten. Just her presence and her unspoken reminders were enough to make them live in fear. After completing the intimate and proactive actions, Kavya turned and left the room. Before leaving, she looked deeply into Rakesh's eyes, not saying a word, but her gaze contained a warning that he could not mistake. Rakesh, who had been confident about his relationship with Rohit, now felt himself being pushed into a weak position, as if he had lost control. Rohit, standing still, clearly felt that everything had changed. Kavya not only knew everything, but she was also playing her own power game. He realized that from now on it was he and Rakesh who had to be cautious, had to tread carefully against the scrutiny and control of the woman he had thought was weak. From that night on, life between the three became a silent but tense war. Kavya did not need to repeat what she had seen. Every time she appeared before Rohit and Rakesh, she created a stifling atmosphere, making them never know what she would do next. The threat of Kavya's subtle actions and gentle gestures kept Rohit and Rakesh in a constant state of anxiety. Kavya had gained the upper hand without having to utter a single direct threat. She knew that silence and subtle actions were the most powerful weapons, and she would use them to regain complete control over her life. The wedding day arrived, but instead of joy, a tense atmosphere prevailed in the mansion. Rohit stood in front of the mirror wearing his traditional attire, but his eyes did not light up. There was a growing fear in his heart, a feeling that everything was falling apart. Ever since Kavya caught him in Rakesh, Rohit's life had not been the same. Kavya's controlling actions, her cold stares, and her terrifying silence were slowly disorienting him. The mansion was ready for the ceremony. Fresh flowers, bright lights, and music were playing, but none of the three were truly happy. Rakesh, who had arrived early, felt like an outsider instead of joining in the festivities. The darkness of the secrets they had shared now haunted him. Every step he took in the house made the atmosphere more oppressive. Kavya, impeccably dressed in traditional wedding attire, appeared like a goddess. But beneath that mask was a calculating manipulator. She had prepared for this day, not to welcome a new life, but to start the collapse of everything. As the ceremony began, guests filed in one by one, carrying well wishes and bright smiles. Rohit stood beside Kavya, but everything inside him was empty. The tension in the air was not only present in the eyes of the attendees, but also in Rohit's every breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that Kavya was ready for something terrible. Kavya, on the other hand, appeared eerily calm. She did not look like a happy bride. Her gentle actions, her meaningful smiles made everyone think that she was completely at ease. But in fact, Kavya had planned a cruel revenge. That even as she gave Rohit intimate hugs and gentle smiles, her heart was cold and determined to carry out what she had planned. As they exchanged glances in full view, Kavya recalled the times she had warned him. She had told him about the price of betrayal, about how nothing could escape her gaze. But Rohit had not listened. The times he had come home late, the averted looks, the lame excuses he had made, Kavya had recorded them all, in detail. She had warned him over and over again, softly but with a tinge of menace. Everything has a price, she had said, and now that price would be paid. Every time they had hugged during the ceremony, Kavya's gaze had not been filled with love, but with coldness and calculation. She had known it all along, from the times he had faltered when talking to Rakesh, from the subtle signs that others might have missed. And today, in the moment of exchanging rings, the calmness in her heart was not because of happiness, but because she knew the tragedy would soon begin. As the ceremony progressed, Kavya slowly walked up to the stage with Rohit to exchange rings. The vows were recited, but with each word that came out of Rohit's mouth, his heart felt like it was being squeezed tighter. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down, and then the unthinkable happened. Kavya suddenly stopped in the middle of the wedding, not because she was emotional, but because she had decided it was time to act. When she turned to the guests, no longer maintaining her usual gentle demeanor, she began to tell the story, a story of betrayal that no one in the crowd could have expected. As she recounted the relationship between Rohit and Rakesh, every little detail, every lie that they had kept hidden for years, the truth was now revealed right in the middle of the wedding, before everyone's eyes. Murmurs began to spread throughout the room. The guests were stunned, not knowing what was going on. Their eyes were on Rohit and Rakesh, who had been dragged into this horrible drama. But no one could have guessed that this was just the beginning. Kavya did not stop at exposing the secret. She had prepared a more devastating blow to end it all. With a sharp gaze and an authoritative voice, she waved to a waiter standing nearby. This person stepped onto the stage with a small, discreet but mysterious box. The guests in the room gradually quieted down, each feeling the extreme tension that was taking place. No one knew what would happen next. Kavya slowly opened the box. Inside were photos of Rohit and Rakesh in their most intimate moments, undeniable evidence of their relationship. She didn't say anything more, just gently held each photo up for everyone to see. The crowd fell silent, the smiles disappeared, replaced by confusion and shock. Rohit stood still, feeling everything around him collapsing. Rakesh was also frozen by the brutal truth, unable to find a way out of this situation. Rumors began to spread in the crowd, and the whispers turned into a wave of anger and resentment. A prestigious family, a lavish wedding now destroyed by betrayal and lies. But Kavya didn't stop there. She continued, in a monotone and emotionless tone, exposing each secret that Rohit and Rakesh had kept hidden for so many years. She tells of their meetings in the dark, of how Rohit betrayed both his love and his responsibility. So the truth was revealed to everyone. The atmosphere in the room was no longer one of confusion but of disgust. The eyes that looked at Rohit and Rakesh were full of contempt, and Kavya, the betrayed woman, stood there with a calm expression that was frightening. She had won. All her plans had gone perfectly. But the tragedy was not over yet. Kavya, with the last of her cruelty, turned to Rohit and said a single sentence, "This is the end of you." In that moment, in front of everyone, she pulled out an object from another box, a shining knife, a symbol of the betrayal she was about to inflict. Then she stabbed Rohit straight in the face before anyone could stop her. Rohit fell, no longer able to cry for help or fight back. The whole room erupted in screams and chaos. People rushed towards Kavya to stop her, but she had already accomplished her purpose. Standing there, her hands covered in blood, Kavya showed no remorse. Her eyes were fixed on Rakesh, who stood motionless, unable to believe what had just happened. In the final moments, Rakesh collapsed beside Rohit, trying to save the man he loved. But it was too late. Rohit was no longer moving, blood seeping out and soaking his formal attire. The battle ended brutally and bloody. Kavya stood there, amid screams and chaos, but she felt no fear or regret, and she knew that she had won the final victory. She had avenged her betrayal in the most brutal way possible. Kavya, with a mysterious smile, walked away into the chaos, leaving behind the complete destruction of everyone she had loved and trusted. Kavya leaves the scene, disappearing into obscurity. Rohit's family falls into complete humiliation and isolation. His death not only destroys the family's reputation, but also turns everyone in society against them. Rakesh, who witnessed Rohit's death, lives in torment and obsession, and finally disappears without a trace. Kavya, after a period of being on the run, is arrested when the police find her hiding place. During the trial, all her crimes are exposed. Although Kavya shows no remorse for her actions, she is still sentenced to life in prison for murder. Her life, once a symbol of revenge and power, now ends behind bars, leaving behind a tragic story of blood and tears.